one thing that we have forgotten about our history as well is that the federal government, they formed the so-called Federal Bureau of Investigation. It was called the Bureau of Investigation. They formed that in 1908. And during World War I, they had the first chance to really actively do their work in America. And they heavily targeted religions. And one of the religions that they targeted was Seventh-day Adventism. And why are they targeting Seventh-day Adventism? They're targeting Seventh-day Adventism because they are targeting all groups that they perceive to be liberal. And so the federal government during World War I was convinced that Adventists were socialists, communists, and that everything we were publishing was quote unquote red.
Wow.
And I mean RED, so like I mean the color.
Okay? Yeah.
And so they're doing this and they're saying this and they're infiltrating our camp meetings, they're infiltrating our churches, they are confiscating our mails, they are intercepting our telegrams, they are doing all sorts of stuff to block what we do. I could go on and on about that. Well, but the point and the thing I want to stress is this.
I'm sorry, can you go back over that? I've never heard that before. Not anything close to that. So don't feel like time is an issue right now. Can you talk about that a little bit more? I mean, they were like intercepting our mail and telegraphs.
Oh yeah. This is a time when the First Amendment rights in this country had never been defended in courts.
Okay.
And so the American federal government rode roughshod over all First Amendment rights during the First World War. And it was only going to be later. And they did throughout the 20th century, but this is the clearest time that they did.
So this is not conspiracy theory stuff. This is
my word, no. I have over 2,500 pages of declassified FBI files that I found.
Wow.
And no, we didn't know about this before. We just simply did not know about it. So it's no surprise that you're hearing it for the first time. I have shared this in a couple of academic papers, and there is a podcast with the Adventist Peace Fellowship where I talk about this some that's online. But yeah, we were not the only group that the government was seeking out, but we were intentionally targeted. And they came to us and they said, either you change what you're publishing or you're going to go to prison for a long time.
Wow.
We're saying that to our leaders.
Wow.
And here's the important factor. The reason they're saying that, one of the main reasons they're saying that is because of this doctrine that we have called the two-horned beast.
Mercy.
Okay? And before the Civil War, we are clearly consistent.
Kevin, I can't anymore, man. I can't. I just can't.
I'm going too fast. Huh?
No, you're not going too fast. We're going to give him time to breathe.
I just need some time, man. Just give me a few moments, please. I don't want to miss anything else you have to say, but just give me a moment for myself, okay?
All right, you tell me when I can continue.
All right, okay. All right, go ahead.
All right. So the two-horned beast doctrine, it's from Revelation 13. And what we're saying before the Civil War is that America is this two-horned beast of Revelation because it looks like a lamb, but it speaks like a dragon. And that beast has two horns. One is supposed to represent religious liberty. The other one is supposed to represent social or civil liberty. And so America claims in its First Amendment, Declaration, etc., Constitution, that all men are created free and equal and entitled to equality, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, etc. And so those sound like great things. We're all supposed to be able to worship however we want. We're supposed to be able to get along and vote and be considered an equal in society, all those kinds of things. That's what America is claiming. And Adventists are saying that lamb-like beast looks and speaks like a dragon because it claims those liberties, but it denies them to religious minorities and civil, social minority, racial minorities specifically. The number one thing that they talked about the most was oppression to black people. And so Adventists continue to preach this doctrine, saying that America is currently, right now, the two-horned beast.
Not future.
Not in the future, not when they enact a national Sunday law at some point, but they are the beast now because they are oppressing racial minorities and, to a degree, but not as significantly, also religious groups who are trying to observe Saturday Sabbaths and other things. It's not just that issue alone. In the early period, we were never single-mindedly focused on the national Sunday law.
Yeah.
And so we're preaching this doctrine.
It wasn't just African Americans. I'm sorry to cut you off, but it was also Native Americans too. Wasn't that kind of clumped in there as well as like why we would look at America, the way America treated the Native Americans? Was that part of it?
That was also talked about some, never to the degree of blacks, but yes, it was. It was also included we honestly haven't had as good of a history when it comes to Native Americans, but nevertheless, that was still there.
Yeah.
Okay.
But slavery was the big issue at the time. And so it primarily focused on that, and then also lack of equal rights for blacks. But they do include Native Americans. And so Adventists are preaching this doctrine and claiming that America is this beast now. Okay? And they're continuing to preach this all the way up until World War I. And the government gets a hold of our literature, and as it turns out, they don't like to be identified as this two-horned beast of Revelation 13. They find that offensive. They find it subversive. They find it dangerous. They find it unpatriotic, 100% American, which was a huge phrase that everyone's throwing around during World War I era. You got to be 100% American. And so they come to us and they say, guys, this can't happen.
Wow.
And so one of the most popular books in Adventist history for colporteuring and other things was a book called Bible Readings for the Home Circle.
Yeah.
We were preaching and printing that doctrine in that book. In 1918, when the government comes knocking at our door, they say, change it or go to prison. And we say, okay, we'll change it. And they didn't tell other Adventists, but they changed it anyways. And what they did essentially is this. They said, okay, America is not the two-horned beast now. It's going to become that in the future.
Wow.
And also, it's not really America that's the two-horned beast. It's really just liberal Protestants within America that we've got to worry about, and they're going to end up taking control of the government.
Okay,
and so there's going to be like a coup.
Wait, stop, because now I can't breathe. Because this is, I mean, and I heard you say this, because you said this on the Light Bearer meeting a couple of nights ago, or the Zoom, and I heard it then, but just hearing you say it now, well, you didn't say quite that 3 nights ago. You didn't say that they came to the Adventist church and said, you have to stop preaching this, and we actually changed it. Ivor and I spoke together about it and said, you at an evangelistic series, that's how it's taught. It's that in the future, this is what will happen, but it's not the current. My husband has a sermon called Beast Mode. He's preached it different ways. It's called Beast Mode, that he preached, well, recently, but several years ago originally. And it kind of was saying the same thing, but we did not have this history behind it. Yeah. For sure.
Well, this is the genesis of that moment when we start to really clearly start making this a future prophecy. And so this is what's going on. And they change it. You can look, I mean, I can show you the 1916 edition that came out just before the World War I.
Yeah.
And then you look at the 1918 edition, you compare those chapters, the titles are changed, the way they're talking about these things are totally different. I mean, I'm not making it up.
Yeah.
And actually Douglas Morgan pointed this out for the first time in his book, Adventism and the American Republic. But he did not know about the surveillance issue, at least to the extent that I have found out. And so this happens. And so Adventists do a lot to shift at this point. And so after World War I is over, I mean, World War I ended a couple of months after they're doing this to us, and we agree to change. And in the wake of that, we say, okay, we've got to change the way we do ministry and evangelism in America. And so the church starts to hold Bible conferences. The first one was in 1919, which we talk about all the time, at least right now, because we just went through the 100th anniversary.
Yeah.
But we only talk about what happens with Ellen White.
Yeah.
We don't talk about what happens at 1919 as a conference meant to control and train our evangelists so that they are no longer preaching, quote, a sensationalist message. And so Adventists are starting to do that in ministerial conferences as well as Bible conferences. And they're telling Adventists, don't start running out of the gate in your sermons with teaching Adventist distinctives. Draw them in with the gospel. Draw them in with what every evangelical is already going to believe. And then later, eventually, you can talk about things like the two-horned beast. But don't talk about it publicly in your evangelistic meetings, please. And so they're teaching them to do this kind of stuff. And they're training them to do this kind of stuff. And I'm not coming up with this on my own. So a historian named Howard B. Weeks wrote about this stuff in the 1960s. And he knew nothing about the government surveillance, nothing about what was a major motivating factor in prompting the Adventist church to make these shifts. He just saw this happening, thought it was just sensationalism during World War I, and said, oh, the church realized, hey, we've got to change. And so he writes his doctoral dissertation on this, and actually the Review and Herald publishes it. And so this stuff all ties in together, and you can see there was intentional, calculated maneuvers that our church made to do this. And I think that in this process, Adventists are wanting to draw closer and closer to evangelicalism so that they can be aligned against a common enemy like Ivor just mentioned. And there's several other factors going on. As we're getting closer, it's during World War I that the evangelicals start to refer to us as a cult. We want to overcome that stigma so bad.
Yes. And that's
that we're going to do whatever we can to prove that they're wrong. And this leads to the 1950s questions on doctrine, which we talk about in so many other ways. But this is also hugely significant in the fact that we are trying to prove that we really are evangelicals. And that's all well and good. I don't have anything against evangelicals, and we do share many things theologically with them. However, these things come at a cost. And I think that they really need to be explored in more depth, because I don't think we realize currently how deep that cost was. But I think one of the casualties was race. I think another casualty was gender. But we're not talking about gender today.
Wow.
Benjamin.
Yeah. That
what did I get wrong?